what really strikes me is the difference in standards between Australia and any other side, even to a degree England. South Africa and England and India are very good sides.
Another Women's Cricket World Cup has come and gone, and Australia have done what Australia do. They win a Women's World title. 6 out of 8 T20 World Cup crowns, 13 out of 21 Women's World Cup titles across formats. This team is invincible, it's unstoppable, it's indomitable. We're running out of adjectives. We're thinking, let's make this debate beyond cricket now. Where does this Australian women's side rank in the history of great international teams across sport? It's a loaded topic. I give important riders here. International sport only, so keep your club allegiances aside. And we're looking at team sports, so forget about individual sports that aggregate into bigger medals at, say, an Olympic level. Since it is a loaded topic, we've got a loaded ESPN cast from across our ESPN universe. We've got Osman joining, Joy joining, Dustin, who's a Runorder veteran, Xenia, a Runorder debutant. Welcome, everyone. Let's start first by me just going around the group and asking you what for you are historically the greatest teams you have seen in sport. Let me start with you, Joy.
Okay, I haven't seen the Brazil team of the 60s and 70s. I'm not that old.
That's not why I started with you, Joy, just so we're clear.
I think Brazil, and for me, I think that the greatest team I've seen, the West Indies team of the 70s, 80s. I saw the team in the 80s. I have not seen a team strike, terror into the opposition as much as they did with their batting, bowling, and for such a sustained period. So for me, I think West Indies cricket of the 70s to the mid-90s would be the team.
Osman, we talk about cricket conversations quite often, and obviously West Indies men's of that Joy pointed to, and the Australian side of the late 90s and early 2000s. Who else are you considering in the mix, even outside of cricket?
So those two, to go back to the first question, those two would be my first. I think Australia, just, I guess, some recency bias because I've seen them win. And, there used to be stages when I think watching that Australian men's team would have been very much like what younger people now following this Australian women's team feel. It's, there is like a mix of, oh my God, it's them again, but oh my God, it's them again because they're so good.
I'll throw another football team out there, and that's the US women's football team or soccer team.
Yeah.
Especially of the last decade. I mean, of course, they've got a big history. They've won 4 out of 8 World Cups, 4 out of 9 Olympic gold medals. But I think particularly this team, what strikes me about them is that, I mean, the rest of women's football has kind of caught up, and a lot of people thought that they would now be usurped and some of the European teams would start beating them at the World Cup, but they won the most recent World Cup. The thing that really draws me to them is also the stuff they've done off the field in terms of, really fighting for equal pay, which has now had a knock-on effect for all women's sport in the US, not just football.
Xenia, why don't you weigh in?
The US football team and the Australian women's cricket team have a lot of similarities in that sense, in the sense that they are the gold standard. You want to win a women's FIFA World Cup or a cricket World Cup, you have to go through US, you have to go to Australia in that sense. And as Usman said, the Australian men's team that we saw a few years back had that similar sort of reputation. When you are up against them, you feel like this is not a match we're going to win. One other team I'd like to throw in the mix, and this is also more historic, is the Indian men's hockey team. Specifically their Olympic performances, and this was on both sides of the independence struggle. So India would have been a very different sort of country then, and to have all those Olympic gold medals on both sides of what was this independence struggle, I think that sort of historically makes for a very great team too.
One name that I'll throw into the hat from my side, even though I haven't seen much of that sport, I'll confess, is the New Zealand All Blacks, who are the only side to have won back-to-back Rugby World Cups. They went through 5 years between 2011 and 16, where they lost only 3 out of 71 tests, considered by many as one of the greatest teams. So, okay, we have a big pool of some of the greatest teams. Now, where do we put this Australian side? Everything we've seen about them, the way not just them winning all the titles, but dominating tournaments, right? Like you guys are saying, you face an Australia and you almost lost half the battle even before you started. So now going around the room, Osman, let me start with you. what about this Australian side makes them contenders for this argument, and subsequently, where do you place them in this?
Yeah, I would place them in, like, if I was ranking them, they'd be in that top three of like the most dominant teams across any sport of any era, easily. I think, their level of success is on a different level. I think, and it must do with other sports as well. It speaks a little bit, especially modern sports. I think it speaks a little bit to how much resource a country has, how much resource a country is willing to pump into this kind of stuff. It's not just having that resource, but it's also the willingness to pump into that particular sport. What really strikes me is the difference in standards between Australia and any other side, even to a degree England. South Africa and England and India are very good sides. It's almost like I say, you put them in the top three of other teams across any era who have been that far ahead of their competition.
I would just add one thing to what Usman said is, say he brought up the example of Spain. And the thing about the Spain side was that it was roughly the same team between 2008 and 2012. And then after that, you saw there was a fairly dramatic decline. This Australia side, from what little I know, has evolved. There are only a couple of players, who were there maybe 10 years ago. So they have been building, they've been replacing, and that is the test of a really great team or a really great culture. That people go out and you can replace them and you can retain that level of intensity, that level of fear factor. So I think that's what makes them really, really good.
And Zenia, to that point, if you look at this last decade where they've swept through everything, the one tournament that stands out because Australia didn't win it was the 2017 ODI World Cup. And if you look by the reactions within Australia, they thought it was a bit of a crisis at the time. Does that in itself show you the stature of this team over more than a decade? That one World Cup, where it took one of the all-time knocks, mind you, to knock them out, felt like, how could we even lose? Is that how great they are?
Right, and just to add to that, the 2016 T20 World Cup, right before that, they lost in the final to West Indies. So there was this period not so long back where Australia didn't have either the T20 World Cup or the ODI World Cup. How they come back is they win the next three on the trot, and all three finals, except perhaps this one against South Africa, have been pretty convincing wins. And those margins, you would be hard pressed to believe that they are finals. Tells you why women's cricket doesn't have a big, a big three or a big four. It's like a one team.
In a sense, they almost make the sport boring because they make it predictable.
Yeah, exactly. I think you could see the reaction when India got to the final of the Commonwealth Games. I mean, that there was already a celebration in India. It's like, okay, we've gone as far as we can. We've got the silver. Now there's Australia in the final. So that's there's a bit of hope. But honestly, we were already celebrating the silver before you even played Australia. That's the kind of aura that I guess they have at the team right now.
Wow, so we do have consensus, which is rare on Runorder. But I guess that's how rare this... I guess this is how rare this Australian team is. We are witnessing something truly once in a lifetime. So enjoy it. It makes sport a little boring, but enjoy it.